Why Israelites are not King James only. Welcome back, y'all, to another episode and installment. This is Pre-Sakah, aka Deacon Genesis. Big G's, not the little ones, here to feed the little ones, giving all praises, honor, and glory to the Most High. Why Israelites are not King James only. And if an Israelite is King James only, then he is just lacking in scholarship, academics, and biblical, manuscriptural, and critical sophistication. You can prefer it, or you can be used to it, but to be only King James or think that it has authority over other translations is just a lack of education on your own behalf. When there's plenty of resources and information out here to clearly show you otherwise. Nevertheless, I will proceed on this video today. Fair use.
In that sense, my love for the King James Bible is a corporate conviction. But secondly, and probably more helpfully, my love for the King James Bible is a personal conviction. I'm personally fully persuaded that the King James Bible is God's word for English-speaking people for textual reasons. And by that I mean the King James New Testament is translated from the received text, the TR, but most modern versions were translated from the critical or eclectic text. And for a variety of reasons, I believe that the critical text is corrupt. The underlying manuscripts of the King James Bible are what the church consistently used for almost 1900 years. By comparison, the underlying manuscripts of the modern versions have been somewhat recently discovered. That's why they're called modern versions. They're relatively new on the scene. The time that they were discovered, the people who discovered them, and the places that they were discovered are all surrounded in controversy and theological agenda.
Okay, if that's the case, then let's take a look and see. First of all, the Texas Receptus is not 1900 years old. That's for one, more like 1700 years old. For two, why do we see apparent errors in the English KJV, apparent errors that other translations have fixed if they have some type of dubious agenda? For example, in Isaiah 34:16, Isaiah 34:16 says, not 16, I'm sorry. Where is what I am looking for? Okay. 14, excuse me. I'm going to have it highlighted here so you guys can see it. In Isaiah 34:14, it says, "The wild beasts of the desert shall also meet with the wild beasts of the island. And the Seder," what the heck is a Seder, man? "shall cry to his fellow." So there's going to be multiple Seders here. What? "The screech owl also shall rest there and find for herself a place of rest." What is a Seder, everybody? A Seder in Greek mythology. What the heck is Greek mythology doing in God's word, if you believe that King James is God's word in the English? In Greek mythology, a Seder, also known as Silenus or Selenos, is a male nature spirit with ears and a tail resembling that of a horse, as well as a permanent exaggerated erection. What the heck? What?
I'm not gay no more.
So this is a man with a horse's tail, big ears, with a permanent hard-on. It'll look like this in mythology. This is what the King James says is going to be. Multiple of these are going to be in Babylon after being destroyed with the other desert-like creatures. Hide your kids, hide your wife. Now look at the other translations. They're going to fix this and say Seders aren't even real. Why would the scholars King James commissioned even put that there? So let's take a look at the other translations, and then we'll look at the actual Hebrew word. So look at, even the New King James changes it and fixes it. The New King James says, hold on, let me make, wild goat, because that's what the Hebrew says. Wild goat. The NLT says hyenas and wild goats. The NIV says night creatures and wild goats. The ESV says hyenas and wild goats. But the KJ says this creature with a permanent hard-on. Rocky. Now let's take a look at what this word is in the Hebrew. And you'll see why other translations are saying wild goat. Because it literally just means a hairy goat. So where King James scholars got a guy with a permanent hard-on and a horsetail is out of my jurisdiction. Just means hairy goat, and every time it's used, it means hairy goat. Not a guy with a permanent hard-on. Okay? So let's continue. In Acts 12. In Acts 12, we see Easter being used here in the KJV. It says, and when he apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to the four quaternions, of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Why is the KJV translating this word into Easter as if the first century Israelites were keeping some pagan holiday? I'll tell you why. Because a translation by definition is interpretation. So anybody influenced with presuppositions are going to put that influence into what they're translating, their belief system. The doctrine is going to drive the text instead of the text driving the doctrine, which is backwards and insincere and really malicious. Now look at what this word is in the Greek. Let's see if it's a pagan holiday called Easter, or if it's, it's Pascha, meaning what? Passover. That's what it means. Passover, literally. 28 times it's used as Passover, and then one time King James commissioners says, let's put Easter in there. So let's talk about hidden agendas and motives. This is one right here to keep people in pagan idolatry. Now, let's go to another one. What in the heck is Lucifer doing in an English Bible? What is the Latin word? Lucifer is a Latin word. You just said King James is God's word in English, but there's a Latin word in here. It's supposed to be Hebrew and Greek translated into English, but nah, there's a Latin word here. Why? Because during this time, the false doctrine that Satan is Lucifer was heavily engraved into the minds of Christians, and so they wanted to try to further this by putting this Latin word Lucifer in the text. When it's the Hebrew word, let's take a look and look at other translations fix this. Just like, let's go back here, I forgot. Just like other translations fixed the Easter thing in Acts 12:4. NIV says Passover. NLT says Passover. ESV says Passover. So what translation actually had motives? Now, going back to the Lucifer thing, look at the other translations. They don't have Lucifer. They have shining star, because that's what this word means. Shining star, morning star. Is literally what the Hebrew word means, is morning star and shining star. That's how it's supposed to be translated into English, not transliterated into a Latin word. Motive and agenda. Moving on, we have a unicorn. What the heck does King James? What the King James doing with a unicorn? Numbers 23 and 22. God brought them out of Egypt. He hath, as it were, the strength of a unicorn. Well, this is a unicorn. What is the obsession with King James and his commission, the people he commissioned, the scholars he commissioned? The infatuation with mythological creatures and characters. When all this word means is an animal with a single horn, possibly rhino, but let's see what the other translations say. They say wild ox, wild ox, wild ox. So the other translation actually fixed these things. You know, I once upon a time was a King James onlyist, but I saw the light. I saw the light.
Shut your black mouth.
And I had to tell people that if they think that, you know, King James is the zenith and pinnacle of all translations and authoritative and holds the hegemony of all translations, you, my friend, have been deceived. All right, everybody, we on to the next 100 videos in a week. I hope everybody is enjoying this and being edified. It's not going to be put out all at once, but throughout time. So keep us in your prayers, y'all. We going to move on and on to the next one. It go on and on and on and on.